look at how classes can be structured to meet individual student needs through small group instruction. And finally, we'll explore some resources that can be used to monitor student progress throughout the year.
So good evening. My name is Catherine Munson, and I just want to echo what everyone has said. Thank you so much for being here, taking the time on an evening after you've worked all day. You are amazing, and we appreciate you. So thank you. I'm going to start by discussing assessment. Prior to discussing how to use small group instruction to address unfinished learning, we'll take a moment to review data sources that can be used to determine unfinished learning and the formation of small groups. Assessment can be formal or informal in nature. Formal assessment that takes place prior to or during instruction is considered formative assessment and is used to guide instruction. Formal assessment that takes place after instruction is summative. Summative assessments are assessments of the student learning and are frequently used for grading purposes. As teachers, we are assessing all of the time. The informal assessment that continually happens in the classroom, listening, questioning, and observing, is also formative and helps to shape instruction. While formative assessment is assessment of learning, summative assessments, while summative assessment is assessment of learning, formative assessment is assessment for learning. Formative assessment data can be gathered from many different sources, including rich mathematical tasks, classwork, exit tickets, and homework, along with quizzes and benchmark tests. While teachers gather data from formative assessments, they should also be providing feedback to students and adjusting instruction to meet the needs of students as identified by the formative assessment data. I cannot emphasize enough how important that feedback is to the students. The main purpose for assessment is to improve student learning, right? It's through assessments that we are able to learn what students understand along with their common misconceptions and errors. It's really important for us to know what they understand, where are they at, and where we can take them. Assessments allow us to monitor student progress and growth over time and make informed decisions about instruction and assessment, both in the short-term and long-term range timeframes. We spent time talking about assessment to start the session because we need to be using formative assessment to learn about student understanding so that we can reflect on our own teaching and adjust to meet student needs. Collaborating with colleagues to unpack standards will help us determine what students need to learn and what assessments will let us know that they've learned it. Remember that formative assessment is ongoing. We can use data gathered prior to instruction to begin the planning process, but must continue to use formative assessments while teaching and after teaching material in order to continue supporting students on their learning journey.
So let's look individually at several different resources that can be used to gather formative assessment data. We'll go through this list that you see on the screen. We'll start with the fall growth or the through-year growth assessment. When you analyze the fall growth SDBQ, think to yourself, what data will provide additional information about students' understanding of prerequisite skills and content? The SDBQ can't provide a full picture, so what else can be used to gather additional information? What evidence will you look for that will show students have learned prerequisite skills and content? If evidence shows students are approaching proficiency but not there yet, how will you scaffold current grade level instruction? It's important to look at individual student data, but also data that encompasses your entire class of students. Remember, the SDBQ item descriptor for items answered incorrectly may not represent the only place a student's learning gap may be evident. And the items that are answered incorrectly may not represent a total lack of understanding of that skill. One might think that the spring SOL assessment is more summative in nature. And as a test that assesses mastery of grade level content at the end of the academic year, it really is. However, the spring SOL assessment can be used much in the same way as the through-year growth assessment that's being administered this fall. The SDBQ can provide information about student understanding of prerequisite skills for their current grade of instruction.
So I get to tell you about just-in-time quick checks. These are one of my favorite resources from the VDOE. And as I was sharing them with teachers last week, they said it was the best resource I had ever shared with them. So hopefully those of you that are familiar with them think the same. And if you're not familiar, hopefully you will think that soon. So the just-in-time quick checks were designed for grades kindergarten through Algebra 2 to help teachers identify students with unfinished learning and assist in planning instruction to fill potential gaps just in time. Each SOL and bullet from kindergarten to Algebra 2 has a quick check associated with it. As new content is introduced throughout the school year, teachers can use the quick checks to identify and diagnose unfinished learning at grade level and/or to assess understanding of prerequisite knowledge that may be needed to access grade level content. Quick checks do not need to be given in their entirety. Teachers can administer individual questions from the just-in-time quick checks at the beginning of math as a warm-up, during math as part of classroom instruction, or at the end as an exit ticket. Virtual just-in-time quick checks were developed to facilitate using the just-in-time quick checks in a virtual learning environment. The virtual just-in-time quick checks present the same formative assessment questions through Google Slides or Desmos activities that allow students to interact with the questions in a digital format. So I'm going to take a moment. So in the chat, one of my wonderful colleagues has placed this document that has all the links that we're going to reference today. And after tonight's presentation, right after we're done, we are going to link in today's presentation. So you will have a copy of the presentation as well. So if you were to click this just-in-time quick check link right here, it's going to take you right to this page. And as you can see, all the grades, like I said, K through Algebra 2 are at the top. And if you want to click the grade level you're interested, I'm going to click in grade 3. It's going to skip me right down to all of the third grade just-in-time quick checks. They're there in a Word format if you'd like to make adjustments or changes. And they're there also in the PDF version of the quick checks. So when you open one up, you will see that they just have a wealth of information. So it starts with the standard itself, the grade level skills. There is a bookmark that will take you right to the questions and a bookmark that will take you right to the teacher notes. But I suggest you really look at these top supporting resources because it's amazing. They're all there right together. So if there's a MIP, it's there. A co-teaching MIP is there. The word wall cards are there. And if there is a rich mathematical task associated with that SOL, it will be located right here. And remember, I was saying that you can access prior grade level knowledge. Well, right here, if you click, this will take you to the Word document of the second grade SOLs associated with this standard and the first grade SOLs associated with this standard. And when you go down, you'll see these wonderful questions. And a lot of people tell me that I was told this today actually in a planning meeting. They say, I always skip this part and go just to the questions. And so luckily after we had the discussion, they're like, okay, well, I'll go back to that top part. So the questions are great. And remember, like I said, you don't have to use them in their entirety. You can cut them apart, give one question at a time as a warm up, an exit ticket, or during instruction. But the place that I really think I get a lot of information and it's so powerful are the teacher notes here at the bottom. So this will tell you, okay, if the student had trouble with this, this might be why, and this might be something you could do to help them with small group instruction or intervention. So I really love the idea of giving these as exit tickets, warm-up tickets, and then looking at that information and using that to form my small groups with the students. And we talked about the just-in-time, the virtual. So here you are with the Desmos, and here's with student preview. And a lot of my teachers that even though now that we're back to face-to-face, they still like using this because it will get them the information quickly on what their students know, where their strengths are, and where there might be some gaps that need to be filled in. And it does have the teacher notes here, but one of the unintended consequences is if they're using that, sometimes, again, they forget about this top part. So just be sure that you realize that that is there because it has a wonderful, it's a wonderful source of resources for you. So next, we're going to talk about my next favorite resource. I know you're probably thinking she likes everything, but I really do. These are wonderful. The rich mathematical tasks can provide additional insights into student understanding and misconceptions. A committee of math educators from around the state came together to create the rich mathematical tasks found on the VDOE site. This committee included teachers, math coaches, and math specialists from around the state. These rich mathematical tasks engage students in sense making through deeper learning that require high levels of thinking, reasoning, and problem solving. Because the tasks are open-ended and allow for a variety of access points and provide opportunities for students to use a variety of strategies, they can allow teachers to really see a student's thought process and not just a correct or incorrect answer. One of my favorite sayings is that students can get the wrong answer for the right reason, and they can get the right answer for the wrong reason. So this really gives us a window into their thinking, and we can see again, where are those strengths? What do they, what do they know? And allow us to figure out, okay, what may be some misconceptions. Many of the tasks include student anchor papers displaying a variety of student work, along with scoring rationale that explain how the committee would score the student with a rubric. It's important to note that all tasks do not need to be scored using a rubric in order to provide meaningful data that can guide instruction. Analyzing student work to look at strategies used can provide much insight into student understanding and misconceptions, and can help to determine where a teacher needs to focus instruction. For a while, for a whole class, if many students are demonstrating similar misconceptions, or for a small group of students that may be using an inefficient strategy or struggling to complete the problems. So I'm going to take you just to see one of the individual task template, because they provide a wealth of background information as well as information to use while implementing the task and reflecting on student learning. So again, on that landing page that we shared with you, you have the just-in-time quick checks, those virtual just-in-time quick checks. Now we're going to be on this third bullet, the rich mathematical tasks. And when you click on that, again, you get to the landing page, and you can bookmark it again and go down to the grade level that you would like to look at. And I chose to look and open up this task for packing pencils, which is third grade place value. So it starts at the top. It tells you a task overview and description. What are the kids supposed to, be getting out of this? What is the purpose for this task? Then it talks about the primary SOLs and related SOLs. It gives you the learning intentions, and it shows you the success criteria. How do we know, or how do students know that they have been successful learning what we wanted them to learn using this task? It also shows you the process goals and how this connects to the process goals. It gives you an idea of the approximate time frame, like how long is this task going to take? Is it going to be one class session, 2 class sessions? It tells you some ideas of how you might want to group your students. It tells you the technology and materials you're going to need, and it also tells you the vocabulary that's important to emphasize with the students during this task. Anticipated responses will be down below. It tells you, okay, how can you launch this task? What can you do during? How are you going to monitor the students? How are you going to select work to be shared at the end that will really help the students and further their understanding? It gives additional supports. Here we'll see sentence frames, and we're going to talk a little bit more about sentence frames later. It talks about extensions, which I like that part too. So it gives you ways to scaffold and extensions for the students. It talks about what you do after. How can you connect the students' responses? And it has that teacher reflection about the student learning. Again, all to see how we can help our students and move them further along. It comes down to, this is also the questions that you can ask the students as they're going along. If a student has starts with saying, I don't know how to do this, it gives you questions on, okay, how can you jog their thinking and get them started on the task? So these are assessing questions, great for formative assessment, see where they're at. And then there's advancing questions. So these questions we say you ask while you're standing there with the students to kind of formally hear what they're saying and gauge their understanding. These advancing questions are questions you might ask and then leave and let them start to work on their own through the task. Here is a copy of the task itself. And then here is the rubric at the end. And remember, we said you don't have to always score on a rubric to get valuable information, but it is valuable to go through this process with your colleagues, because you learn a lot about the students. I just went through and did this with a fifth grade teacher the other day, and it was really interesting and provides a really nice conversation into students' strengths. Again, also, you might choose not to do all four rows. You might just focus on mathematical understanding if that's a little easier to start with, and then add a row as you get stronger with this process. And if there are any graphic organizers, they'll be there right at the end. All right, I told you a lot about those. You can tell those are one of my very favorite resources too. So teachers complete formative assessment all the time. Every assessment or classwork activity provides an opportunity for teachers to learn more about student understanding. Many teachers make anecdotal notes or use checklists as they are working with students and ask students to give feedback through verbal cues, fist to five, exit tickets, and other forms of assessment that don't necessarily include collecting work from a student. While classwork is a valuable tool for formative assessment, the other forms that we just mentioned are just as important. So in a moment, you will be sent to breakout rooms. While you're there, you're going to have 10 minutes to discuss formative assessment. You're going to use the first breakout questions on the links document. So when you go back to this links document, right down here, there's a set of these first breakout questions. What are you using for formative assessment? How are you gathering data from formative assessments? Do you use other forms of formative assessment that were not already discussed? Was an idea presented in this session that you'd like to explore further with your students? So when you get into your breakout session, please take a moment to introduce yourself and tell your colleagues where you're from. This is a great opportunity for you to network with people throughout the state. So Deb, I think, is going to put you in for us into these breakout rooms. You're going to have about 10 minutes, and at the 9-minute mark, we'll give you a warning that your time is almost up.
Catherine, I'm going to open the rooms now, but maybe Vicki could put in the chat those questions that you would like them to discuss while they're
Skip just dropped it there.
Perfect. The rooms are open, and you should be getting a little link near the bottom of your screen that tells you which room to join. So we'll go ahead and turn it back over to Vicki and Catherine.
Awesome. I hope you had some great conversations with your colleagues in the breakout rooms. For the sake of time tonight, we are not going to do a whole group share out from our breakout rooms, but if you were having a conversation and you've got a question that you wanted to put out there to the group, or even just a statement that you wanted to address, feel free to drop any ideas in the chat throughout. We are monitoring that chat, and we'll try to come back to those questions as we continue through the session. But we're going to continue on. And now that we've explored a variety of formative assessments that can be used to gather data about student understanding, let's explore some ways we can structure our math classrooms to best support students in accelerating their learning, to address that unfinished learning and access on grade level content. It's important that we keep an asset-based mindset as we address unfinished learning. This quote from Ron Berger's article, "Our Kids Are Not Broken," illustrates the need to maintain high expectations and keep an asset-based mindset. I'm going to stay quiet so you can read that quote to yourself for just a moment. I just feel like that quote really exemplifies everything that we need to keep in mind as we are moving forward with instruction and really trying to focus on keeping that asset-based mindset as we move forward. So let's dig into some routines and structures. As we explore classroom routines and structures to address unfinished learning, these 4 bullets are ideas that we need to keep in mind. Each structure and routine can be used in a variety of ways to allow access to on-grade level learning while also providing review of previous material. In order for this to be most effective, we must consider the vertical articulation of content and content connections between and within grade levels. These 4 structures provide maximum opportunities to address unfinished learning and provide on-grade level instruction for current content. We'll spend some time discussing each of these routines and structures because having these in place allows you to maximize differentiated instruction through teacher-led small groups. Number sense and reasoning routines are a structure that can be used each day to launch the math lesson, just like we launched our session this evening with an alike and different routine. Number sense and reasoning routines can address current content or spiral in content from previous grades. While many teachers think of a number sense or reasoning routine as a hook or introduction to the lesson, they do not necessarily need to correspond with the content that you are going to cover as part of your main lesson. Number sense and reasoning routines are designed to be a conversation starter that draws every student into the math class. Teachers may choose to use content that does align explicitly with the day's lesson. However, teachers could also choose to use content that ties more to a prerequisite skill that students might need to fully access the day's lesson. However, teachers could choose to use the content in more the form of a spiral review, using examples from a previous grade level or material covered previously in the current school year. Number sense and reasoning routines could also be used as a formative assessment, using content that will be addressed in an upcoming unit. Number sense and reasoning routines could include number talks, as well as a variety of different routines, including the ones you see displayed on the screen. This list is included on the Bridging for Math Strengths website, which we've linked to in that links document. But a quick search for high yield routines or number sense routines online will yield many other sources for these types of routines for starting your math lessons. Many of our students struggle to communicate about mathematics with each other. Providing sentence starters for students can give them a launch point for meaningful mathematical conversations. Note that some of the sentence starters focus on ways that students agree with each other or add on to another student's thinking, while other sentence starters focus on more appropriate ways to disagree. Many times teachers decide to hang some or all of these sentence starters on the wall to serve as a reminder to students when they are participating in class discussions. Teachers might also choose to place small laminated copies on student desks. It's important to remember that students must be taught how to use the sentence starters. They must be introduced to the students and strategically practiced in order for students to internalize them and automatically use them as part of their classroom conversations. Now let's look at a routine that could be used in a 3rd grade classroom. If you've determined that the majority of students in your class could benefit from a review of place value concepts, this number sense and reasoning routine can be used to reinforce representing numbers in a variety of ways, incorporating base 10 blocks to model place value and correctly reading 3-digit numbers. All of the representations you see on the screen show the number 234. Students may justify that the lower right corner does not belong because it is the only one written in numerals. Students might justify that the upper right corner does not belong because it uses only 100 flat block. Students may justify that the lower left corner does not belong because it uses 34 ones instead of 3 10s and 4 ones. As long as students are able to justify their reasoning, any of the examples could be the one that does not belong. The teacher can use this routine as both a spiral review and reteaching content from previous years, as well as a formative assessment of what students do understand about place value and place value models. Let's look at another routine. This one is an alike and different routine that might be used with a 4th grade classroom. In this example, this could be used as a formative assessment. Let's say you are preparing to teach an upcoming measurement unit and want to do a quick assessment to determine what students understand about metric measurement. This number sense of reasoning routine could help. Display the slide and ask the students to turn and talk to a neighbor about how the top image is similar to the bottom image. Have students share as many different ways that they are alike as they can think of. The teacher can monitor individual student conversations, strategically listening in for ideas related to measurement. Maybe that they're both rulers, they're both metric rulers, they both start with 0, but that 0 doesn't actually start at the edge of the ruler. Select several students to share ways that the images are alike. Then ask students to talk with their partners again about how the images are different. The teacher can listen again for ideas related to measurement, focusing that whole group share out on how the spaces at the bottom ruler are smaller, maybe calling them millimeters, than the top ruler, which you might call centimeters. If students don't address the idea of measurement and focus more on the fact that the images just show a number line, encourage them to think about where they would see a number line like these two. What tools might they use that have number lines like this? I see a question in the chat about where these could be found. If you go to the link for the Bridging for Math Strengths document, yes, Deb just dropped it there in the chat. There is a page there dedicated to reasoning routines, and we will explicitly point out where some of them are located within some of the resources for specific standards as well a little bit later in our session. Let's look at one more reasoning routine. This is an example of 2 truths and a lie that might be used in a 5th grade classroom. Let's say you notice that your 5th grade students did not perform well on a question on that 3-year growth assessment that involved determining parallel and perpendicular elements in a figure. But the item descriptor wasn't specific enough to really know exactly what the students struggled with. Using this number sense and reasoning routine could help you to determine if the student struggled with the general concepts of parallel and perpendicular, if maybe the student struggled to apply these concepts to a specific figure, or if the student simply didn't understand the notation that was used as part of the question. Prior to asking the students to think about which of the 3 statements is a lie, first ask the students to just describe some of the things that they notice about the figure on the left. Listen for students describing the lines using their names, like line RU or UT, as well as talking about which lines intersect. Students might discuss types of angles that they see. They might discuss that right angle notation. Once students have discussed what they notice about the image, then have students look at the 3 statements on the right to determine which 2 are true and which one is a lie.
I love starting with those high yield routines because if we can get students talking at the beginning of the math class, they're that much more likely to be talking throughout the math class. So so I usually start with a high yield routine and then I head to the mini lesson. The mini lesson should address on grade level content that all students need to learn. As teachers, we frequently think that addressing content through small group instruction makes it more accessible to students. However, when we are cycling different groups of students through small groups with a teacher where he or she is teaching the exact same lesson repeatedly, we are removing the opportunity for differentiated small group instruction to occur. If we want to maintain a focus on meeting individual students' needs as part of teacher-led small groups, current on-grade level instruction should be provided primarily through the whole group mini lessons. And then those small groups are where we can really meet the students where they are at in their learning. So we do our mini lesson, and then next we're going to talk about small groups, but what are the kids doing that aren't in a small group with you? They're going to be in these independent stations, and independent stations can contain a variety of content. Station activities do not all need to focus on current grade level material. Stations can incorporate spiral review from previous grades, spiral review from previously taught on grade level content, or current content along with practice and digital resources. Students should incorporate manipulatives and stations should incorporate manipulatives and the opportunity for engaging practice. At times, students may work independently as part of math stations. However, working with a partner or small group of students provides time for students to engage in meaningful conversations about the mathematics. Teachers may choose to use random groupings or choose heterogeneous groupings where students in each group demonstrate a variety of strengths and different skills. Teachers may also group students together homogeneously at a station to practice a specific skill. And we know that this year with COVID and some of the regulations and rules around that, this has been a little bit more challenging. We aren't going to address this now, but if you want to stay back at the end and talk about that a little bit and problem solve with us some ideas to help, we'll be happy to do that. As you prepare to set up stations in your math classroom, you must also consider some logistics. Ask yourself some of the following questions. Are you expecting students to cycle through all of the stations? Or are there stations that are must do and some that are may do? Are you allowing students to choose which stations they complete? Where are students going to work at stations? Will they remain at their own seats or move throughout the classroom? Will you have an accountability piece at each station? You may choose to have stations that you expect all students to complete. If you choose to go this route, it may be helpful to have a station rotation chart that reminds students which station they should be focusing on. As you determine how long you want students to work in each station, consider how long it will take to be involved in meaningful mathematics at each station. There are oftentimes, if you use time stations and it clicks and it's 15 minutes or up, the kids have just gotten into what they're doing. And sometimes that's like they're right at the aha time and they lose it because they have to move on. On the other hand, you also have students that are 9 minutes into it and they're already done and they're ready to move on, and they can pose a behavior problem. So if possible, I love the idea of not having time limits, but again, you have to really have these structures in place. They have to know where they're going, what they're doing, who they can do it with, and what to do if they were to finish, what could be the next thing that they were going to do. Students love to have choices and tend to be more invested in work when they have a say in the work they are doing. Because of this, you might want to allow students to choose which station they work in or which station they start in each day. Some teachers like to have a choice board that students add their name to as they select their station, like the ones you see up here. With a choice board, you can set how many students are in a station. When a station is full, students must choose a different station. And again, now we know there might be, certain rules about how many people we can have and if they have to stay 3 feet apart. But these are just things to think about, and you want to have those considered before you go into your station routine. Teachers may also opt to have a menu of options for students to choose from. Some menus include required activities along with optional choice activities that can be completed after the required components are finished. So a must do and may do, and you see there's a menu tic-tac-toe up here. There are the choice boards where you have an appetizer, an entree, and a dessert, and you have to complete the meal. And so you have those required activities, and the entrees tend to be some meatier activities. So it just depends on how you want to structure it with your students and what makes the most sense for you.
All right. The next step to preparing stations is selecting the activities and materials that you'd like for your students to use. There should be a balance of hands-on activities that students complete independently and those that they complete with partners or small groups. A variety of sorts and games can be used by partners to keep students engaged in the mathematics. It's important to sometimes include an accountability feature with the activities, but it's not necessary to always have an accountability through a reporting sheet that students have to submit. Sometimes having that accountability feature adds on an extra layer that makes it cumbersome, and the students focus more on that and they struggle to stay engaged in the actual activity. You may wish to use games and activities that are provided as part of your division adopted curriculum resources, or you may wish to use some activities that are provided through the VDOE. Many of the mathematics instructional plans, or as we call them MIPs, include activities that would be perfect for math stations. Some of them are even titled with centers or stations as part of their name, making finding those activities even easier. The Bridging for Math Strength website also includes many resources that can be used in independent stations. One thing that is particularly helpful with both of these resources is that they're organized by standard. So finding resources specific to a particular standard is really easy to do. Note that several of the resources for grades K and 1 are provided as seesaw activities so that students may interact with them easily by using technology. So let's go ahead, and we're not going to go live to a MIP, but we're going to show you just a screenshot of the website. Many of you are probably already familiar with these lessons. We did include the links to this on the links document, but as you can see, they are organized by standard within each grade level. Catherine, if you want to click to the next example, we'll see a kindergarten example. The mathematics instructional plans, or MIPs, include a detailed plan for instruction. The plan includes materials, vocabulary to focus on, specific teacher and student actions, along with questions to ask and a variety of options for assessment and for enrichment. This particular kindergarten MIP is one that includes centers in its name, and it details 7 different activities that can be placed in math stations that focus on this kindergarten skill of counting. So this is a great one to pull, and you have 7 station activities ready to go there for your students. The Bridging for Math Strength site, which is under construction with additional pieces being continually added, is also organized by standard within each grade level. And I think, Catherine, you're going to go live out to this one, right?
Yes. So once you get here, are you talking them through this, Vicki?
Yeah, I can talk them through that unless you want to talk and drive at the same time.
How about I just get them to, so I opened up these tabs just in case of technology emergencies. I wanted to have them ready. So you go to this page and then you click on whichever grade level that you want to go to. I clicked on grade 3 for this example. So then it's going to take you to this page right here. And as Vicki said, this is under construction. So the ones that are linked that are green are the ones that are ready to go. And these have not been linked yet, but they will be linked. From there, I clicked on the 3.1b example for Vicki. And now I'm going to stop talking, Vicki, and let you talk.
Okay. The main page for each standard has many resources that are right there on that page. You can see that it's scrolling through some images, and there are links right there to the right-hand side of the page. Those links include formative assessments, routines, rich tasks, and games that might be e-learning games or games that you can print out and use for student use. This is another place where you can find those high yield number sense routines right here tied to specific standards. I do want to point out to make sure that you click on the link for the full module with instructional tips, which Catherine just did. Because it will open up a new document, and there are additional resources within this document that aren't necessarily linked onto that main landing page. So definitely open this up. There are additional resources linked in here. And again, more instructional strategies spelled out for you. And I think there were more things linked on that 3rd grade page today than there were last Monday when we did this same session. So when we say it's continually being updated, they are working on that one. So check back if what you were looking for initially wasn't there in the first time. Okay, Catherine.
Okay, so teacher-led small groups are tailored to meet individual needs. Small groups include differentiated instruction and can include specially designed instruction, or SDI, that is tailored to a particular student. It addresses their individualized education plan, a program, IEP goals, accounts for their disability, provides modifications or adaptations to content, and encourages access to the general education curriculum. This is where content from previous grade levels or spiral content from previous instruction can be remediated. Students should be grouped in fluid and flexible groups that change based on identified student needs. The group should be homogeneous and intentional, as mentioned before, should be different than the whole group mini lesson. To survive this year, guys, we have to do small groups. They're just such a differentiation of needs in these classrooms. The small group is really going to be the key to getting these students where they need to be. The same sites mentioned previously for station activities can also be used to find resources for teacher-led small group instruction. I love that bridging site. I've been telling teachers that that's a great place to go for some resources for that small group instruction as well. So the mathematics standards of learning tracking logs for grades kindergarten through algebra 2 have been developed to assist teachers in identifying which standards students have had sufficient exposure and experience during the 2021 school year. They may support decisions regarding when and how experience with new standards might occur this year. The Mathematics Bridging Standards document, K.8, have been created to assist in the identification of content that can be connected when planning instruction and promoting deeper student understanding. Standards are considered a bridge when they function as a bridge to which other content within the grade level course is connected, serve as a prerequisite knowledge for content to be addressed in future grade levels of courses, or possess endurance beyond a single unit of instruction within a grade level or course. A planning document like the one pictured here helps teachers keep track of specific students and skills identified for small group instruction. Small groups provide the opportunity to work with students at their edge of understanding. Think about this as the Goldilocks Principle, where the instruction provided for each group is not too hard or not too easy. It's the just right place that helps students move forward in their understanding. We've been doing that in reading, right? We get their reading level. We don't want to give them the book that is too easy. We don't want to give them a book that's too hard. We want to give them the just right book. We want to do that same thing with mathematics instruction. We want to make it just right and have students on their edge of understanding. So we're going to get ready to go into breakout groups again. You're going to be with the same groups, hopefully that you were with before. I know we had to make a couple of changes for various different reasons. So if you're new to the group, please introduce yourself and let them know where you're from. Again, you're going to have about 10 minutes to reflect on the structures and routines that we have discussed. And we'll put this back in just in case somebody's lost it. But this is that link page that has all the links that we've been talking about. And the second set of breakout questions are there as well. We want you to talk about what resonates with you and what are you going to commit to trying to do from all the things that you've heard at the beginning of this session. So Deb is going to break us out. And we'll see you in 10 minutes.
All
It's
right.
the Goldilocks.
I think everyone's back.
There we go. It looks like everybody is back. Again, we hope you had an opportunity for some meaningful conversations around those structures and routines in your small groups. We don't really have time to share out whole group from those small group conversations, but again, if you've got something that you would like to throw in the chat, either a comment from your reflection and your conversation or a question that you have for the group, feel free to drop that in the chat and we will try to address that as we go through with the rest of our session. Let's kind of tie this all together now. So let's imagine that you are looking at the fall growth SDBQ reports for your class as you prepare to teach your whole number place value unit. And these examples are looking at fall growth SDBQs specific to 4th grade. So these are your 4th grade students in this example. You notice that the majority of your students have a report similar to the top example for number and number sense, and that 4 students in your class have a report that is similar to the bottom example for number and number sense. Take a moment and look at those examples and reflect on what this data is telling you. So as you look at those, you are probably noticing that at the top, the majority of the class was rather successful with whole number place value, but they struggled with comparing fractions with models, words, and/or symbols. However, when you look at the bottom, that's a slightly different story. The 4 students that did not demonstrate proficiency with any of the number and number sense standards on that assessment may need some remediation in whole number place value concepts from previous grades in order to be successful with that 4th grade place value content. So let's look and see what we could possibly do to support both the whole class and those individual small group of students. So as you prepare to teach whole number place value, consider incorporating a number sense and reasoning routine that will provide a scaffold for all students. The 3.1 Bridging for Math Strength website activities include games and activities that could be used as small group activities with the 4 students that did not demonstrate proficiency with 3rd grade place value, as identified on that SDBQ. You might discover as you're looking at the screen that the high yield routines that would support the whole class are noted there on the left in the gray boxes, and those would give all students an access point to the content and allow you to do some review and remediation as part of that high yield routine where your struggling students could also glean information from the other students in the class. The boxes on the right that are highlighted with red information are more of what you would include with that small group activity for those 4 students that were struggling. And those are coming from the 3.1 Bridging for Math Strengths resources. You can see the activities there. You might also discover as you're working with students in that small group that some of the students are demonstrating proficiency on those skills, and you don't need to incorporate small group instruction for them anymore. You could discontinue that instruction for them. You might want to use the 3.1 just-in-time quick checks or one of the rich mathematical tasks related to that standard as a way to assess students' understanding as part of the instruction in that small group, but also as kind of considering exiting students from that small group instruction as well. Let's also think about what we noticed in number and number sense whenever we were looking at the data for the whole class. While the majority of the students were proficient with whole number place value, much of the class struggled with comparing fractions. And we need to think about how we can address that unfinished learning for the whole class so that when you get to the fractions standards in 4th grade, your class as a whole can be successful with those standards. One way to start that is to incorporate some number sense and reasoning routines prior to the start of the fraction unit. The alike and different example on the screen, you see it noted there with the gray box again, uses models and pushes towards that idea of equivalent fractions or possibly comparing fractions. This is a great way to kind of tease out that information pre-teaching before you get to your fraction unit. Another way to address that is to incorporate some games and manipulatives that address fraction review as part of math stations. Remember, your math stations don't have to align to the content of your mini lesson, so you can incorporate some review there. The examples of the top secret fraction order activity and the Mine's Bigger fraction comparing game on the screen come directly from the 3.2C comparing fractions MIP. These activities encourage the students to model fractions and discuss their reasoning with their partners.
So now let's think about some ways that we can monitor student progress, because we're putting a lot of work into forming these small groups, aren't we? So how do we know that our small group instruction is effective? How do you monitor student progress when every student is different? Teachers can use checklists to note observations of how students have mastered content presented through small group instruction. Teachers may also use data tracking spreadsheets to monitor which students they have met with in small group, which skills have been a focus, and when students have demonstrated mastery with those skills. Because once a student has it, then they can move out of that group. Some teachers prefer to have students monitor their own progress using student-friendly ICANN rubrics to document mastery of specific skills. And that's very powerful to have the students tracking their own progress and being in charge of their own learning journey. As our time together comes to an end, let's take a moment to reflect on everything discussed tonight. We're going to do another waterfall chat. So just like before, I would like you to answer one or both of these questions. Considering what you've heard tonight, what are you going to try? What are your next steps going to be? So I'm going to give you a minute. And again, you're going to type into the chat, but don't hit enter until I get to 0. Okay, it hasn't been quite a minute, but in virtual time, a minute seems like so long. I say I'm going to count back, and when I get to 0, please hit enter. 3, 2, 1, 0. Wow, they are definitely waterfalling, flooding in. Oh, I love everything. Oh, yay, just in time quick checks, the reasoning routines, the sentence structures, the bridging for math strength site. Those reasoning routines, the differentiated learning in groups. Wonderful. So hopefully you got a lot out of this evening. And again, we are just so, oh, I see Rich Mathematics has, thank you. We are just so very, very thankful that you took the time to be with us tonight, because we know you have a lot going on. And again, we really appreciate you. We are going to now thank you again for joining us and turn it over to the VDOE team to discuss future learning opportunities. But we will stay after that if you have any other additional questions for us that you would like addressed. So thanks again.
So thank you so much, Catherine and Vicki. We so appreciate your expertise and sharing so many great ideas around using small groups to address unfinished learning. We did want to let everyone know that we do have an additional opportunity to continue the learning. And we are fortunate to have John Amarode and Kateri Thunder, who will be presenting on October the 18th and the 25th around structuring effective math intervention. And many of you know John Amarold's name from the Visible Thinking materials, and Kateri Thunder, who's been a Virginia educator for quite some time and has worked with UVA and at all grade levels. She's been a math coach and many other, has served in many other positions. But I put a link in the chat. If you just scroll back up a little ways, you'll see the link again to the document that this team presenting tonight has shared with you. And the registration is at the bottom of that document. You'll see the description of the session, but do note that the October 18th and October 25th dates are identical, except that the times of those two sessions will be alternated. So on the 18th, the elementary session will be offered first, and on the 25th, the secondary session will be offered first, trying to make it convenient for you and whichever schedule works better, whichever time frame works better for your schedule. So we hope that you'll be able to join us. But again, we do thank Catherine and Vicki for their time tonight, and we thank you for joining us. We hope that you've gotten many great ideas that you'll be able to use. If you want to hang on and ask the team some additional questions, please feel free to do that. Otherwise, we hope to see you at another time, and you're welcome to sign off. Thanks again for joining us.
I have a question.